Well, mental health affects the way we interact socially at a subconscious level. If you believe, I'm good enough, I'm worthy, I'm lovable, I belong, I have something to give, I'm useful, I'm meaningful, I have a purpose, I have a direction. If you believe all those things at a subconscious level, you have good mental and emotional health.
Dr. Patrick Wanis. He has been called a celebrity life coach who often trains coaches, therapists, and psychologists. He is featured regularly on CNN, BBC, Fox News, MSNBC worldwide when the same news organizations are looking for expert insights and analysis on relationships, sexuality, human motivation, trauma, and better mental health. Over 5 million people have read his books in both English and Spanish.
Every relationship begins with you. How do you feel about yourself? How do you perceive yourself? What do you believe is your identity? What is your self-image? That's going to determine the way you even approach other people. Again, I think it's your perception of yourself followed by your perception of the world. For example,
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next talk of the Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms Health Summit. I said this for one other interview before, but this is probably going to be my favorite speaker. Not just because the next speaker is a good friend of mine, but because his expertise is near and dear to my heart. At his core, he helps people dramatically improve their mental and emotional well-being. And just to throw some longevity context into that subject, Time magazine had this to say. Multiple large population studies, including one of nearly 7.4 million people that appeared in The Lancet in 2019, have found that men who suffer from mental health conditions have a 10-year shorter life expectancy than the general population. For women, it's 7 years shorter. From Forbes, we get that the percentage of U.S. adults receiving mental health treatment rose from 19.2% in 2019 to 21.6% in 2021. This is a major concern, and what is the point of living longer if you suffer, even on a relatively small scale, especially if there is actually solutions? Our next speaker is going to help us provide clarity on why it is that we suffer, how this impacts our physical health, and what we can do about it. Our next speaker is Dr. Patrick Wanis. He has been called a celebrity life coach who often trains coaches, therapists, and psychologists. You may wonder who helps therapists and psychologists manage their experiences and manage their emotions. Patrick is the guy. He is featured regularly on CNN, BBC, Fox News, MSNBC worldwide when the same news organizations are looking for expert insights and analysis on relationships, sexuality, human motivation, trauma, and better mental health. Over 5 million people have read his books in both English and Spanish. I'm happy to call him a friend, and it is with his help and guidance that I have succeeded in business, relationships, and of course, health. Patrick, thank you for joining us today.
wow, I'd love to meet this guy. He sounds amazing.
Well, he is, and you're about to prove it. So before we get started, let's get a little bit of your background. What really led you to becoming a human behavior expert?
It's an interesting question, and the best way to answer it is that some people have a natural gift and some people develop skills. You can have a natural gift and then develop that skill. I believe it's a natural gift that began in childhood, working with my parents, in the sense that not only did I raise my two younger brothers, but to a certain extent I raised my parents. So my parents would turn to me for counseling, advice, for comfort, for insights. And so I guess they saw something in me from a very young age. And sometimes parents can do that. They see a gift that you have, and they turn to you. And they did. They turned to me. And so it became a natural progression, although I did many other things. I did professional dance and choreography. I did journalism. I did a number of other fields which were all connected because I learned from all of those fields, which tied into the work that I'm doing. For example, I want to say this, I think this is interesting, that even my work as a journalist and a reporter and an interviewer helped me ultimately in the therapy work that I do, because I realized the power of questions. When you know the right questions to ask, you guide someone to discover or uncover something really important about themselves.
So everybody out there is probably hearing that there's an accent. You are from Australia. One of the things that I think is kind of neat is you were one of the youngest people to be able to interview the Prime Minister of Australia. Is that, am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think, I think I was 23 or 24, and that was an interesting interview because, Australians are very forthright, they're very bold, they'll tell it like it is. So I was interviewing the Australian Prime Minister when he came to Tasmania, and this was an interview that was syndicated across the radio stations in Tasmania, and he started arguing me. I just asked him a simple question. Hey, do you stand behind the statements that you made that are quoted on the front page of this newspaper that you bloody Tasmanians have had it far too good for far too bloody long? And he says, oh, you shouldn't believe everything you read in the paper. And I said, look, did you say it or didn't? And then he started coming at me personally. So it was very interesting.
It sounds like you could have been on there's a number of talk shows that feel very much like that. Usually, though, it's the host perturbating the situation instead of getting accosted in that situation. But that's pretty amazing, right? There's the prime minister is like the president of the United States, and so a limited number of people ever get access to him, and you did that when you were in your 20s. So I think that's pretty amazing. And obviously, if you wrangled him, you were probably tipping some emotional hot buttons right away at that young age.
Well, I will say this, back then, very few people ever challenged him. So again, it was the same thing. And I think that even ties into therapy when you know to what extent you can challenge someone. And I will say to my clients, is it okay if I challenge you at this moment? Particularly when we're doing deep therapy, when we're engaging with them in their subconscious mind, and I need them to actually say something to change the way that they think. So I'll challenge them to say, oh, so you are actually blaming the little child that you were for what happened. Can I challenge you on this? And they'll say, okay. And then I might say something, so why don't we punish him more? And so I'll be using the opposite line rather than saying, oh, let's be compassionate. If I see that person is stuck, then I have to get them to change their own way of thinking by saying to themselves, well, no, he's been punished enough. No, it wasn't his fault. No, he didn't do anything wrong. I go, are you sure? How do you know that? And now they're actually arguing with themselves, debating with themselves, and they change their own beliefs without me telling them, you're wrong, be more compassionate, it wasn't the child's fault. But again, it depends on the individual. So if I feel they need to be challenged, I ask them, is it okay to challenge you here? And then other times I'll say, now hold on. You're making this criticism, you're making this judgment about this child that you were 6, and you're saying this 6-year-old was bad, is wrong, etc. Where did you learn to do that? Who taught you to be so critical and harsh, even of yourself? Lo and behold, they'll say, it was my mum, it was my dad.
So I think if the people out there listening are feeling this, it's like you're having these conversations with the younger you inside of you. And I've had this experience both with therapy with you and also in larger groups. You do some corporate training. What's your kind of goal when you're doing corporate training? Because like you're talking very specifically, what's your kind of broader view if you're doing managing a room full of, say, business owners?
That's an interesting question, because is there a real difference between doing group therapy and then doing a corporate training program? If you're there to teach the very basics of things that are nuts and bolts, if you're talking about managerial things or operational, then that's very different. But if your job is, you've been brought, in this case, I've been brought here to help change their entire mindset. I want the whole group to look at the world differently, starting with themselves. If I can get you to look at yourself differently, and then you can look at the world differently, not only do your thoughts and your emotions change, but obviously your actions change. So what are my ultimate goals in a group setting? to still help that individual to get to the place of realizing, oh, there isn't anything necessarily innately wrong with me. I can forgive myself. And if I can learn to be more compassionate to myself, more understanding, more empathetic, then guess what? I can do that with other people. Now, it's true. I can be very empathetic to you and still be very harsh and critical of myself. But when I get to the place of saying, I can be empathetic and compassionate to myself for the mistakes I've made, then it's easier to inspire you. And you also see me being vulnerable. This is one of the key components of effective leadership. And that is the ability to be vulnerable so that people look at you and say, oh, Chris is my leader. He is also just like me. He does also feel pain like me. He does also experience joy. And because he's opening up to me, I can trust him more. Trust is the foundation of every relationship. Your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your business partners, your relationship with your shareholders, your relationship with your team. You need that trust, and trust is always built upon the foundation of vulnerability. Can I feel safe to trust you? Can I feel safe to open to you? So in a corporate setting, I want to teach them the power of vulnerability. You know, we use the term in the corporate world, authenticity, but very few people understand that, because authenticity isn't just about blurting out your opinion. It's about sharing your dreams, your goals, your fantasies, your fears, so that people say, oh, I feel safe around this person. He has the confidence to lead me. We have a unified vision of where we're going, but I also know that he cares about me. I know that he or she wants the best for me as well. So again, in a corporate setting, I want to help you to change the way you perceive yourself, to let go of the painful past so that you can function well in the present with a good vision for the future, a strong vision.
Excellent. So, and I've experienced kind of both ends of that kind of one-on-one and in the group settings, and it's been pretty phenomenal. I want to bring this back to longevity, right? So what do you see is the connection between mental health and longevity?
If you, and I'm sure you have, because you are interviewing every expert on longevity, they're going to tell you that, you know, at least the foundation of longevity is exercise, nutrition, sleep, and then social connections, social relationships. All the studies into the blue zones, that's the people that live over 100 years, all the studies into the people that are very healthy, and one additional study, which I'll share in a second, show that social connection, social relationships, a strong social network is critical to your physical and mental health, which translates to, critical to your mental and emotional health, which translates to your physical health. So Harvard did the longest study ever, about 75 years, and they followed people all the way to the end, meaning to the day they died. And what they found was the one thing that determined happiness and health was relationships, healthy relationships. So if you say to me, okay, well, what's the connection between your mental and emotional health and longevity? And that quite simply is that your mental and emotional health affects your body. It affects your physical health. And so it's not even new. There's been quite a few people in positions of power. And I'm trying to remember who the last person was, but in the US government even, who identified loneliness as an epidemic. And loneliness is equivalent to smoking two packets of cigarettes a day. Just loneliness alone will break down your body. Now think of that, the fact that you have no social connection or you're feeling isolated or disconnected actually harms your body. So what does that tell us? Social connections are critical. What's another example of that? If you're watching this, if you're listening to this right now, I'm sure that you have, as with every one of us, have experienced the pain of rejection. And the pain of rejection feels like an actual heartache. You'll say, my heart is broken. My heart is heavy. I've got a pain in my heart. And what we find is, quite interestingly, is that the brain processes social rejection almost the same way that it processes physical pain. Why is that? Because the brain is telling you that we need social connection. But why? Not just for survival, but to thrive. You need all the people around you. There is not one successful person on the planet who has achieved that success alone. Now we're just talking about career success, financial success. But we need people around us. And think about it this way, particularly if you're talking about Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, special celebrations. You get together with your family and they either make you feel great or you feel terrible. And notice what happens to your body when you come home for Christmas or Thanksgiving. What's happening to your physical body? When you go in, do you feel like someone's embracing you, and do you feel warm and calm? Do you feel like, oh, I'm home? You know, that sense of real belonging, real comfort, real warmth, that sense of security. Or when you go home, does your heart start racing? Do you feel that your blood pressure's risen? Do you feel really stressed out? Do you feel like you're just going to lose control? You're going to break down? Notice what's happened to you just through your social connections. And that's something that I teach too, about being careful of what I refer to as emotional or psychic vampires. So relationships are important. Look at what happens to your body when you're around certain people. Do you feel calm? Do you feel energized? Do you feel like you're expanding? Do you feel confident? Do you feel rooted in the ground? Do you feel like you could do anything? Or do you feel afraid? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel small? You don't even want to speak up. You want to hide. You want to isolate. What's causing all that? The people around you. Admittedly, they're triggering things inside you. But again, it's a beautiful way to illustrate the critical aspect of our social relationships and how that contributes to our physical health as well as our mental and emotional health.
So you're talking about loneliness, right? And social connection, loneliness. I think I read the same thing or similar, 2 packs of cigarettes a day. Now, for I think a lot of people, loneliness is outside of their own mental health. Like how do we bring these two concepts really together?
What do you mean loneliness is outside of mental health?
Well, so loneliness is, and you're kind of described, hey, walking into a home and, you know, potentially your family or wherever you're going for the holidays and not feeling relaxed, not feeling at home. Now, that's, I think a lot of people are like, that's the people around me. They don't equate that to mental health. I think mental health in a lot of people's minds is that's how you feel when you're all alone. At least maybe I'm bringing my own stuff into this. And then when you're around other people, that they're kind of different. How do I interact socially versus how is my mental health? And I'm sure that there's a bridge between those two.
Well, mental health affects the way we interact socially. So it all goes back to what we subconsciously feel and believe about ourselves and the world around us. So at a subconscious level, if you believe I'm good enough, I'm worthy, I'm lovable, I belong, I have something to give, I'm useful, I'm meaningful, I have a purpose, I have a direction. If you believe all those things at a subconscious level, you have good mental and emotional health. I remember Shell once, because I was doing some training programs for Shell, and they were asking me to define emotional wellness because it was a term that they used. And I said, emotional wellness is quite simple. It's simply the way you feel about yourself and the world around you. And the extent to which you feel good about yourself and you feel positive about the world around you, you will have high levels of emotional health. So sometimes we become lonely and isolated because we don't think we're good enough. For example, Brené Brown, who's originally from Texas, who's done such beautiful, amazing work, shining the light on what is shame and how to overcome shame. Shame is the belief there's something innately wrong with me, versus guilt, oh, I did something wrong. Shame, I am wrong, I am bad. Guilt, I did something bad, I did something wrong. When you believe that there's something wrong with you, when you believe that there's innately something wrong with you or that you're bad, you'll isolate and disconnect. Now you're isolating and disconnecting. That's going to affect all of your interactions with people, because the more you isolate, the lonelier you become, the more you start to believe there must be something wrong with me. No one's with me. No one wants to be around me. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think really there are two sides of the same coin, right? Like where if you have good mental health, you're going to go into these situations, and frankly, some situations, family situations or whatever. I know your advice is maybe keep yourself separate from those, right? You still need to engage with family, but maybe limit that time. But they're really parallels. When you have good emotional health, that loneliness is not something that you'll be experiencing much. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, yes. We can become lonely and isolated based on circumstances. It can be situational loneliness. If we've moved to a new city and time has passed and maybe we haven't even started work, or we're working at home in a new job, or we have limited access to people, it's very easy to become lonely. Yes. But the greater level of mental health we have, the healthier we are. Regarding families, etc., what I teach is until you've healed yourself, if your family is highly toxic, then yes, limit your time around them. I can speak from personal experience and say that I have better relationships with my family because of the healing work I did within myself. So therefore, they don't trigger my own insecurities, my former own insecurities, my former self-judgments, because I've healed those. So I can be around them and they're not triggering that in me.
So, and I think I know the answer to this one, where you're talking about you have better relationships with those around you because you've worked on yourself. Isn't that kind of true for really every situation? I know you tend, from the approach of couples work, tend to focus on one and then the other, because it's really about healing them individually. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Every relationship begins with you. So how do you feel about yourself? How do you perceive yourself? What do you believe is your identity? What is your self-image? That's going to determine the way you even approach other people. So for example, there are a number of therapists who refer people to me for work, for help, because they've come to, for example, there's a person in Houston who does this, and he's a licensed marriage family counselor and marriage family therapist. And he sends people to me when he says, look, the problems you have as a couple, you first need to deal with this past trauma. You first need to deal with this past event. You need to deal with this. Go see this doctor. He's an expert in trauma. He's an expert in this. You know, we tend to trigger in each other our unresolved issues. So when people come to me, I say, okay, let's look at you individually. Let's talk about you rather than talking about your husband or wife, because every time a couple comes, they want the other person to change. The husband will say, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, it's my wife. And the wife will say, it's not me, it's him. But if we say, look, let's talk about you first. Let's identify what it is you want that you don't yet have. What is it that you would like to let go of? What is it that you would like to change? When that happens and you go back together, you're not going to be triggered the same way. The other person still needs to resolve their unresolved issues as well. I'll use one more example, a mother and a daughter. So here you have a single mother and a child. I have like five clients like this. And the daughter's around 6 or 7 years of age and they're struggling. And one client says to me, you know, at times I feel like I'm raising myself. At times it's just overwhelming. I can't handle this. And, you know, my child breaks down and I don't know what to do. And so what I'm helping her to do is to resolve her own childhood pain, so that when she sits next to her daughter and her daughter's throwing a tantrum, her daughter's crying, her daughter's closed down, it's not triggering pain in the mother. The mother's able to sit there with the daughter very calmly and be not just strong for her, but to be an open space that says, you're safe next to me. You see, I'm so confident in myself, you're not going to topple me over. And then the child calms down because the child also responds to you. Children are constantly absorbing your emotions. They'll walk into the room, and if you're tense, they'll respond to your tension. If you're calm, they'll respond to your calmness. So if a child comes in and they're screaming and they're throwing a tantrum or they're afraid and they're anxious, you don't want to meet them at that level. You want to be calm enough to say, hold on, I'm here. come here, come here. Maybe you hold them. But the way you speak, the tone of your voice is also going to tell them you're safe, it's okay.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, interesting. So if you were to boil down the most important aspect of mental and emotional health, like what would the single most important aspect be?
Again, I think it's your perception of yourself followed by your perception of the world. For example, you might think, I'm a good person, I'm capable, I'm strong, I'm resilient, I'm smart, I have direction. But then you might think the world isn't a safe place. You might think that the world can't be trusted. You might think that people, when you say the world can't be trusted, that means people can't be trusted. You might say, for example, this is something that was told by a father to a daughter, everyone has bad intention. Now imagine that's the way you're raised. So now, no matter how much you believe in yourself, you're constantly looking around saying, I can't trust anyone because everyone has bad intention. So what is the most important aspect of mental health? The way that you think, feel, and perceive yourself, and the way you think, feel, and perceive the world around you. To what extent are you in control? And again, I know you and I have talked about this in other podcasts, particularly during the pandemic, where you look at the world and you say, what is within my control and what is outside of my control? I'm going to focus only on that which I can control. And the only thing that I have real control over is my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions, because my thoughts and my feelings will also determine my action. We don't have 100% control, but we want to focus on controlling our thoughts and our emotions to the way that we want them to be. The difference between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. The conscious mind says, I want to control the way that I exercise, I want to control the way that I speak, I want to control the way that I interact. And you say, here is exactly the way I would like to be, the way I would like to behave. And the subconscious mind, if you have unresolved issues, says, oh, I don't care what you think. Here's the way we're going to interact because I don't trust the world, because I don't trust myself, because I'm afraid, etc. So again, we want to focus on changing our own thoughts, our own feelings, not denying any of them, but embracing them. You know, Carl Jung talked about the shadow meaning there are things we don't like about ourselves. Well, face them. And then they're no longer this big monster when you confront, oh, sometimes I'm selfish. Sometimes I'm greedy. Sometimes I'm self-absorbed. If you face it, that has less power over you. And again, this all relates to physical health because the way that I feel about myself will determine the way that my digestion plays out. And you know, I've talked about this, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, that people that have experienced a lot of trauma, a lot of pain, fear, rejection, inadequacy in childhood might be the kind of people that live on constant hyper alert. You know, so their body is always racing, their mind is racing. All of that has an impact because it's engaging your sympathetic nervous system. So if you're constantly in an elevated sympathetic nervous mode, then that's really damaging for your body. The parasympathetic mode is the rest and the digest, and you want to balance. If I'm going to exercise, if I'm going to go running, if I need a lot of energy, I'm going to engage the sympathetic nervous system. When I want to rest and when I want to be calm and when I want to meditate, I want to engage the parasympathetic nervous system. So again, the way that you see the world, the way that you feel about yourself will determine your response in your body with the nervous system. And I think the final thing to say is we all have unresolved issues, and they always come down to, what do I not like about myself? Who do I blame? Who am I comparing myself with? Who am I critical of? What do I need to forgive? And so I say, be careful of comparing yourself. Be careful of being constantly critical of other people. And you know, this is why social media is so unhealthy. I just gave an interview recently, again about social media envy, where we look at other people's posts and we become envious. Why? Because we're constantly comparing ourselves. And it's worse if you were raised with, why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like your sister? Why can't you be like so-and-so down the road? And so be careful of constantly comparing yourself to others. Compare yourself to yourself. But focus on letting go of the past by being willing to face the past. You can't let go of it by running away from it. You've got to confront it. And the way that I do it is to go back to the past in a very safe and effective way without reliving the pain or trauma, without getting stuck into a crying bout where you're just crying and crying, but nothing's changing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes great sense. And you talked about nutrition and digestion, actually related to kind of the sympathetic and parasympathetic state, and that always makes, you're talking about digestion. It makes me think of dieting, and you have a theory that for me is the only theory I've ever heard to help explain yo-yo dieting, and that theory is the law of deservedness. Can you talk about the law of deservedness and what is that and how that plays out in well, everybody's life, but you can maybe an example or two of particular cases you've worked with?
So the law of deservedness is not a law of physics. It's not like the law of gravity. It's a term I coined back in 2006 when I was at the time working with a lot of celebrities, a lot of successful people, and I kept seeing the way that they were sabotaging themselves. And I said, why would this person who has this extraordinary amount of success be suddenly sabotaging themselves? Because at a subconscious level, they didn't believe that they are worthy or deserving of that success. And so I realized that there's a correlation between what you believe about what you're worth and not only what you'll achieve, but to the extent to which you'll enjoy it or hold on to it. So I came up with this, what I refer to as the law of deservedness, and that is you'll only get what you subconsciously feel and believe you deserve and no more. And I saw it from experience. If you get more than what you subconsciously feel and believe you deserve, you'll sabotage it, you'll somehow push it away, or you just won't be able to enjoy it, and you'll be drinking away or doing drugs to try and escape the pain of, I don't believe I deserve this success. I'm not good enough. And I love using this one example of Charlie Sheen when he did Wall Street the first time, meaning when he was back in the 80s. And he used to get drunk and stay up all night. And he said, to paraphrase, that his fear was one day they're going to find out that I'm basically nothing, that this is all fake, that I'm an imposter, that I'm not this great thing that they think I am. So again, this isn't just the imposter syndrome, it's deeper. It's thinking I'm going to be found out as being a fraud, or they're going to realize I'm not worthy of this success. So there are many examples, and I'm working on, as you know, with like Action Coach, and Action Coach in Houston has invited me many times to speak, and they're one of the top performing coaches in the entire company. Doug would say to me, look, I've got clients that are able to get to this level. Maybe it's earning 600,000, but they just can't get any higher. They seem to stop at a glass ceiling. And what we uncover in one specific case, it was a number that was thrown out there by his parents about, these sort of rich people must have only achieved that by being bad, through stealing, through corruption, through fraud, through scams, through hurting other people. So if I grow up thinking, if I get to this level of success, I must be bad, I must be corrupt, then I'm not going to get to that level. I'm going to hold myself down. But the same applies in relationships. Do you believe you deserve to be treated well, particularly for women, because women tend to they've experienced physical, verbal, emotional, or sexual abuse. They'll believe that that's what love is. And they'll believe this is all I deserve. So along comes someone that says, I'm going to treat you really well. But the woman, the individual says, oh, no, I don't deserve to be treated that way, because all I know, all I'm familiar with, and what I believe is the definition of love, or the way that I should be loved, or this is all I'm worthy of, is to be abused, is to be mistreated, is to be betrayed, is to be cheated on or lied to. So again, what you subconsciously feel and believe you deserve will translate into your real world. Because if you don't think that you are worthy of something, you're not even going to go for it. How many men say, oh, she's out of my league? Well, why is she out of your league? Why would you say that? Even that alone is a very insightful statement. That person's out of my league, or, oh, no, that's not for me. Oh, no, I could never do that. And many, many years ago, there was a great sort of study done where they put an ad in newspapers back in the day when there were newspapers, and they advertised exactly the same job, one for $75,000 a year, the other one for $125,000 a year, with exactly the same requirements. More people applied for the $75,000 than the $125,000. Now, those numbers may not be exactly correct from memory, but there was a huge discrepancy between the first job and the second in terms of what it offered. So why did more people apply for the lesser paying job than the higher paying job, even though it was exactly the same ad? Because most of the people didn't think they were worthy of earning, for example, $125,000 or $150,000 a year, and they said, "Oh no, I'm not good enough for that. All I've ever earned is $60,000 or $65,000." And a lot of research shows that most people only ever sort of go up by 10%. So again, that's your own limit. That's your own glass ceiling. You've put a roof on a ceiling. You're like, I don't even know if I can see through the glass. And the great example is that study that showed more people went for that lower paying job. Why? Because they didn't believe they were good enough or worthy of the higher paying job. That's what I call the law of deservedness.
So, by the way, I think that explains so many things, and I mentioned yo-yo dieting as one of them. And I think if you kind of extrapolate this conversation, that can apply to people's mindsets about their health and about their longevity, right? Like if you just believe, my grandma died at 60, my great grandma died at 60, so you're not going to make it past 60, there becomes this we sometimes call it a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it also is the law of deservedness. What would you do with somebody who's maybe got a picture, right? The law, they believe they deserve to be in ill health, or they believe they deserve not to have longevity. Like, how do you start approaching those kind of people and helping them?
Well, if I can answer that by going back to your last question, I apologize for not answering that directly. When you talked about yo-yo dieting, so what I've found through experience, and there's lots of other research that will back this up, is that what you believe about yourself, your level of deservedness, will determine your success in a diet, or how long you stick to that diet, or whether you will sabotage that diet. And it's even been shown in other research that you can eat unhealthy food that will not turn into unhealthy cholesterol if you receive love and affection and warmth. And how bizarre is that? The body's actually changing. I'm not encouraging you to eat unhealthy food and just be loved and embraced. It's a simple point. It's a simple point to say, wow, again, our social connections affect our physical health. As far as yo-yo dieting is concerned, and this was the beginning, and I think it was the 80s, that led to what is known as adverse childhood events. The realization that trauma in childhood affects our physical health in adulthood. Another example of the connection between our mental and emotional health and our physical health, when it was discovered that these women were coming to do diets and the diets just were not working, or they would give up. They were actually having success and they would drop out. And I don't recall, all of this information is on my website under the trauma page, but I don't recall the doctor's name, but he was interviewing these women because he wanted to find out, why are you dropping out on a diet that's working? Why are you sabotaging the diet? Why is it not working for you? Like different cases. And one day he asked an incorrect question, just a slip of the tongue, and the woman said something about he was asking about, what's your earliest sexual experience? And it came out when she talked about being sexually molested at age 4. And so what does this reveal? That because of the early childhood experiences, a lot of these women place limits on themselves about attaining physical health, about attaining a healthy body or a body that is even attractive or appealing to other people. And that happened to me in the 90s when I was first started doing stage hypnosis, and people came out and said, "Oh, can you hypnotize me to lose weight?" And this is my answer to your question. So a woman came to me, and there were two women. I did the same hypnosis session for both of them, and one went away and lost a lot of weight, the other one didn't. So I went, and that's bizarre. It was exactly the same session. And then as I worked again with her, I found out that she didn't want to be attractive. She didn't want to lose the weight at a subconscious level because she was still punishing herself for having cheated on her husband many years ago. So again, this is another example to say, what's the connection between yo-yo dieting and the way we think and feel and believe about ourselves? Everything. Because if you believe you're good enough, if you believe you're worthy, if you believe this is something that I am worthy of, I'm deserving of, you'll go and you'll get it. You'll achieve it. You won't sabotage it. You won't give up on it. And so I have many, many examples of women that have come to me. And if I realize, in fact, almost all of us have the same issue, there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, maybe I've done something bad or I am bad, I work straight on healing the root cause. What is it that you believe you've done that is wrong? What do you believe is wrong about you? Let's resolve that. And of course, it always goes back to childhood.
And so that cascades also just through health, right? Because I think there are two aspects of dieting typically. One is attractiveness, right? And then the other is health. So you may believe you deserve to be attractive, but deserve to be unhealthy. And so then you end up in that state, or the reverse could be true. You may believe you're supposed to be healthy, but if you believe you're supposed to be unattractive for whatever reason, self-preservation, something that your parents taught, then you end up in the same kind of unhealthy diet state. That applies even across the board. I was actually having a conversation with a podiatrist over the weekend, and he was just talking about people who, a lot of what he ends up doing is healing diabetic wounds. And the solution is to eat properly. Like if you do yes, we got to deal with the wound and we got to deal with that. But if you would eat properly, then that would change all of the outcomes. You just don't end up coming into the podiatrist for that particular issue. And that is the struggle that these people go through. I just kind of wanted to reiterate that.
Well, let me add something to that because it's a very interesting point. So I have a client who was struggling a lot with a lack of health because of all the other subconscious beliefs that weren't necessarily specifically about, I don't deserve to be healthy. It's because she was driving herself to not sleep, to not eat well, to not exercise because she didn't think she was good enough in this particular area of career. So she's pushing herself and nothing is ever enough. The success isn't enough. So now she's damaging her health because she's not sleeping, because she's not exercising, because she's not engaging in nutrition, because her social relationships are crumbling. So then we have to work on, well, what's causing all of this? It's the subconscious belief that relates to her relationship with her mother and father. And I have a number of women who are in their 40s and 50s, very successful in career, but struggling because of their poor relationship with their mother, where the mother turned to them and said, protect me from dad, or I need you to help me, or I'm depending upon you. And so the child becomes the adult and becomes the caretaker and doesn't receive the nurturing. And then they struggle through life. Or if they didn't have a father and they didn't have a strong, good, healthy father, and so they lack direction in life. Again, it all comes down to your mental and emotional health. What do you subconsciously feel and believe that you deserve? And what do you subconsciously feel and believe about the world around you?
I think that a number of people are going to listen to this and go like, wow, that really resonates. And these are things that I'm already working on, right? A lot of the at least the experts that I've interviewed, these types of topics have come up and they're already aware that they're working on these. And as they release these kind of emotional traumas, even big or small traumas, right? These emotional traumas that things get better regularly. There may be some people out there like, well, nothing really happened to me. I think my life is fairly similar. and yet still there's benefits. Do you have any case like, hey, here's what kind of went wrong. Here's where the lesson was learned at a young age wrong, but seemingly innocuous. That's had big impacts on people's lives.
Yes, it's a very good point, Chris, because a lot of us think, well, wait a minute, I didn't have any major traumas. I wasn't abused. I wasn't kicked out of home. My parents didn't abandon me. They didn't reject me. But then you go a little deeper, and it can be something small as a girl, daughter, age 14, walks into the living room, and dad says, wow, your boobs are big. And he's just a typical male who just blurts out what he sees. And then that girl has an issue regarding her body image for the rest of her life. From the father's perspective, this was an innocent comment. He's just saying, wow, you're growing. But she interprets it a completely different way. She has a body image disorder. Or another situation, this is multiple clients, one where the mother said, don't eat those potato crisps, you're going to become fat. Or another one where dad says, don't do that, you're going to become fat. The child has issues with the body image and constantly is afraid of being fat. Or another example where someone compares the child and says, you need to exercise more because you're becoming fat. And the problem isn't what the parent said, because the parent might have had a good intention to say, look, that food's unhealthy, you're damaging your body. But the child makes a different interpretation, an inaccurate interpretation, and says, there's something wrong with my body. My body will never be good enough. Or it can be just a parent trying to encourage the child to do better, but what the parent is really teaching the child is perfectionism. Oh, you could do better. Why didn't you get an A? Why has he got a B? You should have got an A. Did you study hard enough? And so again, it might seem in adulthood, well, my parent was really tough on me. But what your parent really was doing was teaching you perfectionism, never being good enough. Or another child who, nothing wrong with that child, let's give him the name Mary, nothing wrong with Mary, but her sibling, and I don't remember if this was a sister or brother because it's happened many times, but a sister had other challenges. So the parents gave all the attention to that sibling because the sibling had lots of challenges. So what happens to Mary? She gets ignored. She ends up feeling invisible. See, nothing was actually done wrong to her, but she didn't get the attention, the validation, the encouragement, the praise, the recognition that she needed from her parents. So she ends up growing up thinking, there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough. And at a subconscious level thinks, I'll never be able to get the attention of anyone. I'll never be good enough. Nothing I do is ever enough. So ends up in a relationship where she's not getting attention from her husband, or somehow again sabotages the good relationship or the good marriage. So see, again, it comes back to, what do you think and feel about yourself and the world around you?
So you talk about the child having like, if we look at it at a surface level with kind of adult intelligence, we're like, well, that's innocuous. Or like he's just aware that there's a physical change in his daughter and he mentions it. And then why do children come up with these kind of, well, let's call them inaccurate or not useful interpretations?
Well, they are inaccurate interpretations and they're not useful. Quite simple. First thing is, children tend to be egocentric. So they tend to think that the world revolves around them. Oh, I'm determining the way that mum and dad will react to me. If dad's angry with me, there must be something wrong with me. If mum and dad are fighting, there must be something wrong with me. If mum and dad are divorcing, mum and dad are leaving me. So the child, it's always coming from the perspective of the child. And you know this as a parent. Why do I have to go to sleep at 8 p.m.? Why can't I stay awake? Why can't I have more ice cream? Why can't I keep playing? Children don't understand limits and boundaries unless you teach them. But they also think, because children want freedom, that the world revolves around them. And then if you can cast your mind back to being a teenager, to being 12, you have all these insecurities because your body's consciously changing. Your body is changing, and it's much more difficult for a girl than a boy because a boy has very few physiological changes. But a girl, her hips are going to widen. She's going to get hair in different parts of her body under her arms. Her breasts are going to grow. Her waist is going to grow. And then she's going to menstruate. She's going through all these physical changes and she can barely keep up with them. So unless the parent is really, really attentive and sensitive to be able to walk the child through these changes, the child can easily react and say, my father said something about my breasts, there must be something wrong with me. I have to hide my breasts because my father's now looking at me sexually, whereas he wasn't. So children make inaccurate interpretations primarily because they're children. They're looking at the world through the mind of a child. They don't have the wisdom that you and I have. They don't have the life experience, and their brain hasn't fully developed, so they can't even talk to their emotions. Think about it. You know this as a parent. Children struggle with handling their emotions because it's the prefrontal cortex that's the executive decision maker that's in constant struggle that says, wait a minute, control your emotions, calm down, don't let yourself be overwhelmed or overrun by the emotions. But the brain doesn't fully develop in a human until the 20s. Early 20s for a girl, mid to late 20s for a boy. And that's why you as a parent turn to your teenage child and say, what were you thinking? Well, your child wasn't thinking. Your child was acting with emotion. So again, understand that children need so much more guidance, so much more attention, so much more direction. And you need to be sensitive to the way that they are going to interpret the situation. If your child sees you as a parent, mum or dad, but particularly mum, and you're feeling sad or you're crying, the child not only wants to comfort you, but they now will go into this almost default mode of, oh, I must take care of my mother. I don't want her to be unhappy. I need to be her caretaker. I now need to become an adult. I now need to give to her rather than receive from her. And the other aspect too, I think this is important. Children also become very protective of parents, where they might want to take care of the parent that's sad or depressed, or if the parent is being threatened by the other parent, because their survival is dependent upon the parent. So if I know that I need you to survive, then I'm going to be very attentive to what you're experiencing, very afraid if you're becoming weak or if you're becoming physically sick, or if you are becoming sad or depressed, or if you're potentially going to reject me, because I'm afraid if you reject me as the parent, particularly if I've only got one parent that's taking care of me, I'm afraid if you reject me, I'll have no one. I'll be left completely alone. I'll die. So again, if we try to see the world through the eyes of a child, we have a better understanding of the way that they're acting and a better understanding of the way that we reacted to the things that happened to us and the things that didn't happen to us. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So I know that you work with people, but for anybody out there who might want to start addressing these types of things, identifying and addressing, I think those are two key points. Like, do you have any recommendations that, like, how somebody can kind of start this journey on their own?
Well, first, don't start the journey on your own. You need help. You need guidance. Everyone needs help and guidance. No one can resolve everything on their own, and I don't believe that you can solve every problem on your own. Turn to people that can help you. So people that come to me, we immediately work together, not on just talking and talking and talking, but let's identify what is the real challenge here. What is it you want that you don't yet have, whether it's peace, happiness, to believe in yourself, confidence, resilience. Let's find out, where did it originate? How did it begin? Let's go back to that incident without reliving it, without reliving the pain, but seeing it from a new perspective, and let's change it. Let's change the way you think and feel about the world around you, about yourself.
So maybe it's ask yourself the question and maybe journal on this. What is it that you want that you don't yet have, as kind of an introductory, right?
Or just pick up the phone and I'll ask you that question. I mean, that's the first question I ask every new client. What is it you want that you don't yet have? And some people go, oh, that's a really good question. Can it be about money? I go, yeah, it can be about money. And then we'll ask them, well, what is it about money that's so important to you? And then we might find out that perhaps this person wants financial success, not because they want to buy the house, but because they're trying to prove something. Or again, it relates to some unresolved issue. So just get clear about what is it you want to change in your life? What is it you want that you don't yet have? And it's not always something tangible. It can be a better relationship. It can be feeling better about yourself. It can be having physical intimacy, emotional intimacy. It can be about, I want the respect of my partner. Oh, why is that important? What's happening? How does that reflect your childhood, etc.? And that's what we work on. And all of my clients, 90% of my clients, excuse me, are over the phone and all around the world. Australia, UK, Canada, Japan, France, from all across the US, all around the world.
So, all right. So we've kind of come to our time to wrap up. I've got some wrap-up questions for you related to longevity. Patrick, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
Not a number. My focus is to live as long as I can healthy. But I don't know that I want to put a number on it, because then that's limiting me. I don't want to say I only want to live to 90. What happens in the next few years if we're able to live beyond that? And already we're seeing that that's a possibility, to live beyond 100, 110, 120, healthy, with full function. Yeah, so no limit.
No limit. I like that. And how long do you think humans can live?
I can only talk about the work of other scientists who say, look, we could live to 120, 150 at this moment. We can see that, but we're seeing that. But there are other people that are saying, look, we can live for a lot longer than that.
Yep. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts, because everybody likes shortcuts, that on longevity and a long health span that you would share?
Sleep. You and I have talked about this. Getting the full 7 to 9 hours of sleep, uninterrupted sleep every night. Having purpose and meaning. Because I said this to someone who said, oh, I'm really tired, I can't get out of bed. And I said to him, do you have a reason to get out of bed? And he went, oh. I said, well, if you have nothing to do, no wonder you can't get out of bed in the morning. So have purpose and meaning, and have healthy relationships. Focus on healthy relationships. The rest will take care of itself. Then you'll start saying, oh, I need to exercise. Oh, I need to pay attention to nutrition.
Excellent. And Patrick, how can people contact you?
PatrickWanis.com. If you want to set up a session, you can go to bookings@patrickwanis.com. If you believe that my fees are out of your range, then send an email and we can discuss. I am willing to help people too. I'm willing to help all people in whatever way I can, but financially as well.
Yeah. What in the near future are you excited about?
That I think we're finding solutions to problems using artificial intelligence that we didn't expect. We're finding ways to deal with these, what are termed as forever chemicals. We haven't found a full solution, but we're finding a lot of solutions. We're finding solutions to clean the water. We're finding solutions to clean the air. These are exciting to me.
Very cool. All right. So you can reach him at patrickwanis.com, PatrickWanis.com. He has a newsletter. That's a free newsletter. You get this kind of advice and amazing kind of context around the Law of Deservedness. I find that newsletter to be amazing. So you can find that at his website. I want to share, I know that he does amazing corporate training. I've had him train my teams, and his individual work is amazing. But I'm just so glad that we got to spend this time together, Patrick. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.